So I'm Estelle Biénabe. I'm an agricultural economist researcher from CIRAD, the French Agricultural Research on Agriculture for Development. I've been based in Hanoi for the last 9 years, and I'm one of the scientific lead of the ASSET project, which is the Agroecology and Safe Food System Transition project. And my area of expertise is more food system transformation and how to link up agricultural transformation with market transformation, more specifically. Well, I think it's extremely important because we are really at a time when we need to strengthen the connections between what is happening on the ground locally and what we are developing between the local, the national, and the regional level. And we have a strong momentum, strong dynamics between different networks, different alliances coming together under that agroecological space, and really connecting that more strongly with the global TPP dynamics and seeing what is the value of operating together and how to strengthen the different types of relationships that we can have so that we expand the area of work and capacity to advance agroecology at the different spaces globally, in the convergence of agenda that agroecology can create in the global spaces, and then having that, then framing better the agroecological space in the region and locally and in the country. So we thought it was an extremely good moment, especially now that ASSET has been operating for a few years, that we have been interacting with many different networks, Asiadra, AFA, Alizea, LICA, and then that we think that these things are getting together. And with that research focus and NGO focus and policy focus, so bringing that together with a TPP perspective on having research, being part of that broader multi-stakeholder approach, we thought was very interesting. Yeah, I had quite a number of expectations, but I think it's a very interesting process. It was very much about, well, getting to know more about the different perspectives of different actors on what it means for them to be part of the TPP, what they are looking for in terms of going ahead, and the TPP in the region, and understanding what happens on the global level. And I think these 2 days have been extremely rich in bringing us together to discuss where we come from and what we want to do together. So yes, extremely interesting in this regard. A lot of question marks also about where do we actually stand. I mean, we see that TPP globally, I think, is extremely important. TPP in the region is very new, so that was a very strong value for that. And we see that we are just like, yes, gathering pieces to see how we work together. So yes, very useful. And we see we see how much we need to strengthen what we are starting now, right?
There's a big potential.
Big potential. So yes. So we will need more of these gatherings. Well, there are 2 levels on which I've been operating. From a research perspective, really trying to bring insights into connecting understanding of different dynamics. Like I was saying, the market dynamics, market transformation is not something external to agricultural transformation. So really that this organic approach is to thinking about market transformation. I'm thinking about it from a research perspective, and I think it's an important perspective. And we've seen that today when we were discussing, some people saying we need less market-driven approaches, others saying we need alternative market approaches. So for me, the TPP is a good arena to discuss these things from a research perspective. And acting under ASSET, we've been very much operating on that policy engagement. And policy engagement, we're informed by the research, right? So, and I think the TPP is very strong in that advocacy space, which is informed by knowledge creation with research, working with farmers, working with everybody. And I think on that, learning more about how do we continue and strengthen that space of working with farmers at all levels, not only on the ground locally in the farms, in the plots, but with farmers everywhere. So it's a research and policy perspective for me on how we do, because that participatory action research with farmers has been here for long. But how do we make that like more visible, more meaningful to different levels? So policy and research very strongly, the two of them. I'm going to be shorter than for the other question now. One thing I came with, and when we asked, well, that would be great to have the TPP coming in, that was also because we thought we need to work more on the metrics, right? And I got comforted into that opinion, right? That is really a transversal area where there is a high benefit of having a community working together, because that metrics question is important for everybody from many different perspectives. So that I think TPP is already doing well globally on that, and the capacity to do more together, that was my key message for today. How is the next step, right, in the region? So this meeting is very much a continuation of a process that we've been having since November 2021, if we want to like first regional workshop in our current setup. So it's really a continuation, and it's an important time because it comes after the adoption of the guidelines. So we don't want to be people thinking we were having that process for the sake of producing a document. So that document is important. It's important to strengthen the process. So this workshop comes at that time where right after we had the launch of the ASEAN guidelines, really like creating visibility, communication to the world about these guidelines. And now we say, what do we do with these guidelines? What is the perspective of different people about what is the value of having these guidelines? And how do we move forward together using these guidelines in our different contexts, being civil society organization, being from private sector, being from farmers, you know, all of these things together, right? So that's the point where we stand. So that multi-stakeholder perspective, which we had from the beginning with the ASEAN guidelines, it's just like, how do we, now that we have that common ground, which help us framing things, how do we make these things broader, right? To be totally honest, it's a process, right? So it started small because we needed to create things. We come from a longer trajectory, but we needed to get people to understand what we were intending to do. So we've been progressively gathering people together in that perspective. And I think also one of the major input from the TPP is that putting the stress on working with farmers, right? That's one of the elements of our guidelines. That's important from a policy perspective, but that's also a very important element in that multi-stakeholder process. We see AFA in particular being increasingly articulated into their advocacy strategy. So how do we make that happen in the broader space? So how can the ASEAN guidelines contribute to that broad, inclusive policy engagement from different stakeholders, AFA, ASIADRA, ALISEA, which brings the civil society in a smaller environment because it's less regional than AFA or ASIADRA, but it's really like now, how do we really link up things and build on existing strategies existing in a stronger way, right? Because now the agenda from our side is everybody can look at the guidelines, you know, and alpha agenda, well, I mean, we've seen today are well articulated as well. So what do we do about it, right? I mean, we see the connections, and then what comes next? The other part is the farmer perspective, very important, right? And extremely, and that was a key rationale. Now, you've seen in the meetings on the 2 days so much discussion about how do we go with the private sector? it's a question we cannot leave out. We cannot leave out. We need to tackle that question. So that's also one of the things we want to tackle in this context. And I think to tackle private sector question, it has to be multi-stakeholder, because private sector is not monolithic, right? It has different perspectives on its own. And the experiences from different constituencies with private sector is different. So it's in the multi-stakeholder setting that this question of how do we better align the agroecology agenda with private sector agenda needs to be done in a very strong multi-stakeholder setting, very well-framed approach where we can really make sense of these things and just go beyond just claiming we should or we should not work with the private sector.